welcome to this week's video. Now this week I'm going to talk about something a bit different, but I hope my wife doesn't watch this. She never does it anyway, but it's because I'm looking at buying another amplifier. Now I've only got about 7, so I don't think I've quite got enough. And the reason is I was going to go and try one of these amplifiers at Andertons. Now I'm not doing a video having to go about Andertons because I think it's a brilliant music shop. I've spent rather a lot of money there over the years. I mean, that's the only disadvantage, is they have lots of nice stuff that I want to buy. But I did have a rather interesting conversation with one of the people on the phone there. Just editing the video, got my video editing glasses on. I thought it'd be good to actually have an example of me playing through my amps. So this first clip that I'm just going to show now before we get on to the rest of the video is me playing through my car amp, which is a Handwired one. Then at the end of the video, I'm playing through 2 amps at once. That's my Milkman, but the Marshall as well. So, and it does sound different, but I thought it'd be an interesting addition to the video. So one video coming up now, straight into a Handwired amp, and then a combination of Handwired and printed circuit board right at the very end of the video. So the backstory is I had a meeting with someone up north of London, and I live on the south coast. I was going to drive around the M25 and meet the person I was going to meet, and kind of on the way, not really, but enough on the way, is Guildford, which is where Andertons is. So I was going to pop in there, and the amp I've been interested in, and this might seem strange, the one I phoned them and asked them if they could get it from their warehouse, because it said on the website they had 2 in the warehouse but none in the store. Could they get it from the warehouse to the store for me to try it? Was a Handwired Vox AC4. Now these haven't been out long, these particular ones. These are new versions. I think they had one of these out quite a few years ago, and it's a 4-watt kind of cut down version of the AC30 in essence, and it's got the top boost EQ circuit on it. And it's got reverb, but it doesn't have tremolo on. So I thought this might be an interesting little thing. It's quite small and light, and I thought, you know, it'll break up at quite low volumes, and because I use in-ear monitoring a lot of the time, this might be quite a nice little amp to have. Especially I could run it maybe with another amp. I've got a Milkman amp which I bought at Andertons, you know, so I could have a clean amp and a slightly driven amp running together. Lots of options. I thought it might be interesting, and I could maybe record with it at home because it wouldn't be too loud, because it also has a master volume on, so you can, you know, you can drive it at very reasonable volumes. It was my thinking. I've also changed the way I sort of think about my amps now. Quite often, for years and years, I've used my amp running fairly clean, partly because they're single channel amps and you can't get them loud enough to distort these days. So I'd have them running fairly clean with stuff in front of them to make them break up. I use a, what do you call it, an EP booster to give it a little bit of clean boost, but it adds a little bit of harmonic business to it. And then I've got a clone, I've got a blues driver, I've got various other things. I don't put too much gain in any of them, and I think it still sounds like a valve amp breaking up. But that's the way I've used stuff for a long time. But more recently I've been trying to get the amp kind of breaking up slightly and then boosting it further with the pedals into it, just because it gives a nice sound, and I've just changed the way I do it. Like you do, these things evolve. Anyway, my meeting got cancelled, so I wasn't able to go to Guildford to try the amp, so I thought rather than, you know, just not turn up, I'd phone them. But before I phoned them, I'd been looking on the Vox website again, and I looked and I thought, do you know what, actually I think the AC10, which is the next one up, they've got 4, they've got the AC4, AC10, AC15, and then a full-blown AC30. I thought, actually, do you know what, the AC10, I watched a video comparing the 2 on the Vox website, and I thought you've got a bit more clean headroom. It's still not that big. It's got 2 output valves in a push-pull configuration. It's got more bottom end. It just looked generally quite a lot better, and it wasn't significantly more. It was probably about 20, maybe 25%, 30% more expensive. So it was like 250 quid more roughly. I can't remember exactly. So I thought that's maybe the one to go for. So I phoned up and said, very sorry, I'm not able to come along. Will you be getting one of the AC10s in stock? And he said, well, I'm not sure we will. He said, and this is the point the whole video is about. He said to me, I wouldn't recommend getting the hand-wired amp. You'd be better for the PCB one. To which I was, sorry. I mean, well, I'm going to go through the list of why I think this is a funny thing to say. I'm really doing this video to get people's opinions on this. So I've looked up what are the differences, the pros and cons of hand-wired and PCB amps. So let's not talk about the sound yet, because that's a matter of opinion, isn't it? But there are certain facts involved with these two types of technologies for building amplifiers. Let's also say, let's try and define what we're talking about here. When you're talking about hand-wired, we're talking about, here's a picture of one. This is a Vox. This is one of the new Vox ones, and then this is a sort of Fender Champ here as well. The original amps, you'd have had a kind of a board that you drill the holes in, and you put the little eyelet things in, and then each component is wired by hand and then point-to-point wired on these boards. So lots of separate components, no printed circuit boards. This is just, you make the board for the circuit board, for the circuit you're building. Now, lots of good amps aren't built that way, particularly, you know, that all amps were built that way originally. But say, for example, my JCM 800 here. Here's a picture inside a JCM 800, and this is still decent big components, but they are on a printed circuit board. I don't know, that maybe the potentiometers are hand wired to the circuit board. They're not all, on some amps everything is mounted on the circuit board. There's a kind of hybrid situation here where you get the main circuit board mounted on a printed circuit board, but say on these Marshalls you can probably still repair the components at component level because they're decent sized components, and you haven't got everything mounted on the board like the valves and everything. And then the more modern way of building things is everything is mounted on the circuit board, and they're made from these tiny little components. And I've spoken at great length to the guy who mends my amps, and he says, for example, I was going to get myself a new PA system, and I said, which one would you recommend? I was getting a column PA system, and he basically said they're all rubbish. He said nothing is made properly anymore. It's made cheaply with tiny components, so you only got to get a tiny amount of dust, a tiny bit of damp, and they short out. He's constantly having to mend things, and you have to throw them away. Either you can get hold of the whole board to replace them, or you throw them in the bin, because you can't repair at component level on new equipment. And in fact, my wife this week, she's got a Mackie PA, which I did review, if you check it out, which is a very nice sounding PA, and she uses it a lot, at least twice a week, maybe 3-4 times a week. She's had it about 3 years. She phoned the shop where she got it from, and the guy at the shop said, well, if you've been using it that much, you've done well for it to last 3 years, which just seems ridiculous that that's the attitude these days. Because I've got, for example, I bought a PA 25 years ago. It's a Dynacord Mark 1 desk. It's printed circuit board, but it's made proper components. And this is probably bad luck saying this, but it has never gone wrong. I've used it a hell of a lot over the years, and I've never had to have it repaired ever. The only thing it did once, when I used to keep it outside in the garage, sometimes it got really cold. When I turned it on, it would take a little while for the protect light to come off. That's the only time it's never just turned on and worked. So I asked the guy at Andertons, why would you not recommend hand-wired amps? He said, because if it goes wrong, it will take a technician to go through every component. It will be really expensive to repair. It will take ages. Whereas if you've got a printed circuit board amp, you take out the old circuit board, throw it away and put a new one in. Which, in essence, I get what you're saying, but surely that's missing a point here, and I'm going to go into those points now. So I looked on Google and several different forums trying to get different people's opinions about printed circuit board versus hand-wired amps, and the opposite of what he told me seems to be the consensus of opinion, that one of the good things about a hand-wired amp with all the separate components is easier to repair because all the components are more accessible. You can swap out one component rather than having to chuck the whole printed circuit board away, which, you know, I guess if you're trying to repair things yourself, you can just phone up and go, can you send me a new circuit board? You just plug it in. But that seems a very short-sighted way of looking at things, and also not really a very environmentally friendly way of looking at things if you're just throwing stuff away. I mean, these amps I've got here, I said to him, I've got 4 hand-wired amps. The only things I've had go wrong with those amps is the reverb tank fails because they're on tiny little wires which you can then just get repaired or replaced, and the valves go. Other than that, I might have had the odd thing, maybe the odd knob needs replacing or something, but if you use them regularly, they don't tend to go wrong. It also said that poorly designed or poorly constructed printed circuit boards can be difficult and time consuming to repair, because again, especially with the modern ones, you can't repair at component level because they're all just completely integrated. So here's some of the good points about hand-wired amps. That is, they're less susceptible to vibration related failures compared to some printed circuit board designs. Now, some printed circuit board designs, like I say, when they mount the valves and they mount the knobs and stuff on them, I've had lots of those on, not my amps because they're not made like that, but on other bits of equipment like P8, it will rattle loose because you've got the printed circuit board moving around in one way, and then the knob which is attached to the side of the thing, and it all works loose and falls apart. And again, part of the same point, it's saying that the solder can break. You get hairline cracks. I've had this in lots of my foot pedals and stuff, my guitar pedals, that you get, particularly I had a Boss loop pedal, and that had to go back loads of times because you get hairline cracks on the circuit board, because particularly with that, it's being hit with your foot. It just, the vibration makes these circuit boards crack. That doesn't happen when you've got a hand-wired amp. And of course, the other thing is, you could say, well, it will take a technician much longer to go through with a probe working out which components failed. But when you do find out which components failed, you take that one component off, and how much is one component going to cost? And then you replace it. Compared to the price of a whole circuit board, I suppose you haven't spent the time working out which bit's gone wrong, you just replace the whole thing. It sort of swings and roundabouts in that respect, but surely everything points towards replacing that single component being better. Then I thought, let's have a look at what the cons are of a hand-wired amp over a printed circuit board. Now, the first thing, of course, is that it's a lot more expensive. It's 2 or 3 times the price for the same amp. And here's a picture of the two amps. So this is what the printed circuit board one looks like. This is the Vox AC10, the current one, and this is the hand-wired one. And you can see why it's a lot more expensive. And to me, the hand-wired one somehow just looks better, like it's going to last longer, it's going to be more durable, of your whole total cost of ownership, as they call it, over the period of having it. Surely it's going to end up being cheaper in the long run having the hand-wired one. The other disadvantage of the hand-wired amp is that they're not as consistent from unit to unit. Now, I quite like the idea of that you get one that's maybe a bit better than another one. When you've got a printed circuit board, if they're all done on a computer and machinery all making them, then they're very consistent, and you'll get probably very few failures off the thing. But if a hand-wired one, the guy's having to test it as it goes along, you're going to get variations. So all of those points seem reasonable. I don't agree with what he said, that it's going to be more expensive to repair it. And the other thing he said was they don't sound that much better. And at that point I'm not going to pull him up on it, I can't be bothered to argue really, but I just said, that's interesting you say that, because I said I've got 4 hand-wired amps and I can hear the difference personally. I said, I know that's just me, maybe not everyone can, but I think I can hear the difference. And I've got a few examples of this. Let me show you this video first. I've never actually been able to do this test in this test he's got a hand-wired Princeton and the circuit board Princeton, and to me they sound absolutely poles apart. So let me just play you a little bit of when it's really driven, and for me the hand-wired one sounds so much better. See what you think. As I say, I've never A-B'd the same amp, but I remember when I bought this Vibra King, which I don't know if you can quite see here, I've had that getting on for 20 years, and I sold, when I got it, I had a very similar sized 4x10 Tweed Blues DeVille, not the hot rod one, it was the 4x10 Tweed Blues DeVille. It was a lovely sounding amp, and I do like the sound of 4 10-inch speakers. Well, that's got 3, but multiple 10-inch speakers I think is a really sweet sound for guitar. And when the guy came round to my house to buy the Blues DeVille off me, because I listed it and sold it, it was actually someone I knew, I made this mistake, and I shall never do this again, because I was so pleased with my new amp. I went, oh, you must hear my new amp. And I played it side by side with the Blues DeVille. Now, the Blues DeVille was a good amp, and I played them both clean at similar volumes. The Blues DeVille I'd always thought was a really sweet, nice sounding amp, much nicer than the 2x12 one, which I'd tried it next to in the shop. And I played it next to that amp, and there was something, it's difficult to describe, I can only describe it as being 3D. It had this, it's very difficult to describe, but standing in the room, and even the guy who was buying the new one, he kind of went, oh. I said, well, you're still getting a good amp, but that one, you know, is a lot more expensive. And there's just something about the way it plays, its touch sensitivity. It's not just because in this case it's hand-wired. I wouldn't have thought it's a different type of circuit, but I've had it before in Andertons many years ago. I went to try one of the Tone King amps, and I thought these were hand point-to-point wired amps. It did say something about being hand-wired. And I tried one in the shop, and I played it, and I thought that it doesn't have that same feel that I'm used to with my amps. It doesn't feel hand-wired, even though I thought it was. So when I went home, I looked it up, and I found out actually they're not. They're printed circuit boards. I think they are hand-wired to like the knobs and stuff on the chassis, and maybe the valve bases or something, but they're not truly hand-wired. And I thought I could notice the difference. To the point where I looked up thinking, this doesn't seem hand-wired to me. It's a very difficult thing to explain, because I don't think if I'd have been going from having a circuit board amp and then trying a hand-wired amp for the first time, I would notice the difference. But because all my amps are point-to-point hand-wired amps that I use all the time, when I use one that isn't, I can notice the difference. Even with this Marshall, which is, you know, a very good quality circuit board amp, it's a different type of amp, so it's a bit more difficult to sort of directly compare it, but it doesn't have the same feel to me as one of the point-to-point wired amps. So this is an interesting subject. As I say, I'm not moaning about Andertons. I think it was one of the best music shops around, and I buy like loads of stuff in there, so I don't have a problem with them. It was this guy's opinion. I'm really doing this video because I want to see if other people have any opinions on this. So let me know in the comments. Do you have any experience with printed circuit board over hand-wired amps? Which ones do you prefer? Can you hear the difference? I know I can, and I would always be willing to pay more for one because I think they're more durable. As I say, I've had no trouble with mine. I've had very few things go wrong with them over the years. It's never been anything really on the circuit board failing. It's been other things like the valves or the reverb tank, things like that, or speakers, those kind of things which aren't anything to do with it being hand wired. So let me know in the comments what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video. I bring out new videos 7 PM UK time every Friday, so I hope to see you next week.
Don't suit this 9 to 5. Don't suit this suit and tie. Grab my hat and my guitar, play some Waylon in halftime.